The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the muted sounds of footsteps fading down the corridor. The late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, cutting the classroom into long golden stripes that stretched across the old wooden desks. My heartbeat echoed louder than the ticking clock on the wall. I wasn't supposed to be there after hours, but something about the silence drew me in. It was peaceful, too peaceful, until I heard his voice behind me. It wasn't loud, just a calm, familiar tone that somehow carried warmth and caution in equal measure. I turned, and for a moment, the air between us changed. His eyes met mine, and I felt every thought I'd tried to bury rise to the surface. He asked why I hadn't gone home yet. I wanted to answer casually, to say I was just finishing my notes, but the words tangled in my throat. There was something about the way he looked at me, half concern, half something he didn't want to admit, that made it impossible to breathe properly. The light from the window cast a shadow across his face, sharp lines softening as he stepped closer. I could smell the faint trace of his cologne mixed with the chalk dust in the air. It was the kind of scent that stayed long after someone left, hauntingly familiar and impossible to ignore. I told him I'd been struggling with the presentation and that I didn't want to disappoint anyone. He smiled, the kind of gentle smile that could calm storms, and said he'd help me fix it. I watched as he moved toward the whiteboard, erasing my messy notes with deliberate strokes. His sleeves were rolled up, and the veins in his forearm tensed slightly as he wrote, explaining each detail with quiet patience. Every word he spoke pulled me in deeper, not because of what he said, but how he said it, steady, careful, like he was afraid one wrong tone would break something fragile between us. When he turned back to me, I was already staring. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The distance between us shrank without either of us moving. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was dangerous, full of things that shouldn't be said. My fingers brushed the edge of the desk just to keep them from trembling. I tried to focus on his words again, but his voice had softened, barely above a whisper, and it wasn't the lesson I was hearing anymore. Then came the sound that shattered the stillness, the sudden twist of the doorknob. My breath caught in my throat. He stepped back quickly, his expression shifting from warmth to alarm. The door creaked open, and a faint voice called out from the hallway, asking if anyone was still inside. In that heartbeat, the spell broke, leaving behind nothing but the pounding of my heart and the echo of everything that almost happened but didn't. I froze in place, my mind scrambling to find something to say, anything that would make the situation seem normal. He moved faster than I expected, picking up a stack of papers from the desk as if that was why we were both still there. His voice sounded steadier than mine when he answered the person at the door, saying we were just finishing up some extra work. The door opened wider, and a faint beam of hallway light cut through the dim classroom, landing right between us. The person at the door, a fellow teacher, peeked in, smiling briefly before apologizing for interrupting. She said something about locking up soon and disappeared again, her footsteps fading until there was nothing left but the sound of my shaky breathing. He turned back to me, his expression unreadable now. The space that had once felt so charged suddenly felt suffocating. He set the papers down on the desk, ran a hand through his hair, and let out a quiet laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "That was close," he murmured, half joking, half serious. I nodded, but the words got lost somewhere between my chest and my lips. The air was heavy with everything we weren't saying, the weight of it pressing down until it felt almost unbearable. He looked at me again, and for a second, it felt like we were both standing on the edge of something dangerous, knowing one more step could change everything. I tried to focus on the chalk marks still clinging to the whiteboard, the faint outline of equations and words that suddenly seemed meaningless compared to the storm inside me. My thoughts wouldn't settle. I could still feel the warmth of his presence lingering in the air, still see the way his eyes had softened before we were interrupted. I hated that I noticed these things. I hated that a simple look could make my heart race in ways it shouldn't. He started gathering his things, and I realized it was my cue to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. My hands were trembling as I packed my bag, trying not to make it obvious. When he spoke again, his tone was softer, almost hesitant. He said I didn't have to push myself so hard, that I was doing better than I thought. His words should have comforted me, but instead, they cut deeper. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it, like he understood something I was trying so hard to hide. The sunlight was almost gone now, replaced by the cool blue shadows of early evening. The classroom looked different in that fading light, more intimate, like it belonged to another world entirely. As we stood there, waiting for the courage to walk away, every sound, the distant laughter in the hallway, the flutter of papers, the quiet creak of the fan, seemed amplified. I wanted to thank him, to say something to break the tension, but all that came out was his name, soft and uncertain. He looked at me one last time, and in that look, there was understanding, regret, and something else we both refused to name. He picked up his bag and slung it over his shoulder, pausing for a moment before turning toward the door. I could tell he wanted to say something, his lips parted slightly, but nothing came out. The silence between us felt different now, it wasn't filled with tension, it was heavy with restraint. I watched him reach for the doorknob, the faint scrape of metal against his fingers echoing in the quiet room. My chest tightened with something that felt like panic, and before I could stop myself, I spoke. The words came out in a whisper, trembling, barely audible, yet strong enough to stop him in his tracks. He turned slowly, and when his eyes met mine, everything I had been trying to suppress cracked open. There was a pull, invisible yet undeniable, like gravity. Every rational thought screamed for distance, for boundaries, for control. But emotions don't obey reason. He took a hesitant step closer, then another, until he was near enough that I could see the faint rise and fall of his chest. The air between us was thin, fragile, charged with things that couldn't be spoken. I told him I didn't want things to change, but even as I said it, I knew they already had. My voice faltered, breaking mid-sentence, and I hated how vulnerable it sounded. His eyes softened, and for a fleeting second, it seemed like he wanted to close that last inch between us, but instead, he looked away, jaw tightening as he fought with himself. Outside, the faint echo of laughter drifted down the hallway, students passing by, unaware of the turmoil inside the small room. The sound snapped me back into reality, a harsh reminder of where we were. He took a step back, exhaling deeply, and rubbed the back of his neck the way he always did when trying to hide discomfort. The spell broke, but the ache it left behind didn't. I wanted to say I was sorry, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. Maybe for the look in my eyes, maybe for the silence that carried too much meaning. He gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head, like he knew what I was thinking, and then he said, "We should go." His voice was quiet, but steady, as if he was convincing himself more than me. We walked out together, neither of us saying a word. The hallway lights flickered faintly, and our footsteps echoed down the empty corridor. The world outside the classroom seemed colder, more distant, like we'd stepped out of a dream that shouldn't have existed. When we reached the exit, he held the door open for me, his gaze fixed somewhere far away. The fading sunlight painted his silhouette in gold for just a second before it disappeared behind the closing door. I stood there for a long while, feeling the weight of the moment linger in my chest, like something delicate had been built and broken in the same breath.